What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander, and we are back for a pretty fun video. This is my kind of first reaction and review of some of the new things we saw today for the March of the Machine first look video, I believe, from what's going on in Magic Fest Philly. I was not aware that this was happening today. I do normally keep pretty high up on the news, but I was helping out my wife today get our baby room ready and get some furniture put together, and so I was not really paying attention to my phone or Reddit or anything like that until a friend of mine sent me a picture of a card I'd never seen before, and I said, "Hey, what's that?" And he said, "March of the Machine first look today," and I'd totally forgotten. So I've tried my best to only look at enough to prep the images for us to talk about. So this won't be as much of a first reaction as this will be my reaction to kind of how I think these cards could be played in Commander, if they could be played in Commander, if we can brew around them, what should we brew around them, and that kind of thing, because I think a lot of these cards, especially these legendary cards, are going to become Millzy Brews episodes. The one thing that I'm loving so far from this reveal is that I have already seen more legendary creatures that I want to take a stab at brewing than I did in Phyrexia LB1, and I think that makes me really happy. So brewer number one, because I love brewing decks, but number two, that means that a lot of people are going to be really happy. We're seeing a lot of creatures and a lot of different named humans or creatures or named characters from so many planes and sets across Magic's history, and it makes me really happy, including some of my favorite planes in Magic. So, March of the Machine coming out in April, which is weird because I kind of thought it was coming out in March, but I guess it's been pushed back just a little bit from what I expected. But anyway, we see the regular set logo and the Commander set logo. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the cards that were shown off in the live stream, and then there's some information below this on the article. If you want to take a look at this article, I'm going to put the link down to the article down in the description. It goes over everything we saw in the video, as well as a lot of information coming out in the future. So let's go through it. Our first card, the first thing we saw, was Jin Cataxius. Everyone's favorite blue Phyrexian Praetor is back again. Now, I'm getting the understanding from some of the things that were shown in the live stream that all of our Praetors are back again in this set, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you think about it, all 5 of our Praetors have had 2 cards now, right? The original set, the original cycle, and our new cycle. And in a lot of ways, all 10 of those cards are pretty cool. And they all have different use cases. So we see, my assumption, because I don't know for sure, is that we're going to get 5 more. So we see Jin Cataxius, 3 blue, 5/5, Ward 2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, draw a card. That's already fairly solid on its own. Now, that's an effect that we do see sometimes, but we don't necessarily always see. So that's kind of interesting. But I think a lot of Jin Cataxius playability is going to hinge on this second ability in the backside, which is 3 and a blue, exile that, return it to the battlefield, transformed under its owner's control. You can activate only as a sorcery and only if you have 7 more cards in your hand. So kind of a heavy cost, right? We need to have 7 cards in our hand, which we can do pretty easily if we're slinging spells. So and it turns into the Saga, which is pretty cool. So front side legendary creature, backside Saga, and as we'll see on the third part of the Saga, it flips back. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. For as long as you control the Great Synthesis. So this is kind of an interesting thing because this is kind of a Seagate restoration of sort, but only while we control the Synthesis. So that's interesting because, you know, got to remember in a lot of these spell slinging decks, we're looking to draw a bunch of spells, use Omniscience to unload all of them, use other effects to unload all of them. So if we have 7 cards in hand because the Synthesis flips, we're now going up to 14, and we have no maximum hand size as long as we have this. This is going to lead into some pretty big turns, I'm sure. Number 2, return on non-Phyrexian creatures to their opponent's hands, or owner's hands. So that's kind of interesting. It kind of pays off needing to have Phyrexians or have some way to pay off our creatures being Phyrexians. And then on 3, you may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. Then we exile it and return it back to the battlefield flipped over. So here's our payoff, right? On the one part of the Saga for drawing all those cards, now we get to 3 and we can cast a ton of things from our hand. So it's kind of like a mini Omniscience in that sense. We got to wait 2 turns to do it. Now, someone out there is going to say, but Millzy, that's 2 turns. That's 2 turns on the table. Well, I don't think you're putting Jin into just at this case, I don't think you're putting it into a random spell slinging deck. Clearly, this is a card, if you're playing this as your commander, you're playing extra turn blue spells, right? You want to be getting to the backside of the Synthesis and blowing up to end the game. If you're playing this in an Izzet list or a Grixis list, I still think you're trying to take multiple turns. You're trying to get Jin flipped over, and then you want to end the game with that last ability, right? You want to use all of your spell slinging payoffs to just end the game that way. So I could see Jin being a pretty good commander, and I could see it being in the 99 of a spell slinging deck. Next, we saw Sorcery from the set, Breach the Multiverse, 5 black. Each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards on the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. I don't see this getting a ton of play as far as general commander plays goes. I'm sure there's some deck that's going to want this card. I just don't see it, and I would love to be proven wrong. Let me know in the comments if you have any use for Breach the Multiverse in any of your decks. I don't see it, although I think it's an interesting card, and milling your opponents is never a bad thing. And now we get into the start of our creatures that are kind of coming back from other sets. So what I think we can piece together from the ending of Phyrexia LB1, I'll try to avoid a little bit of spoilers if I can, but the Realmbreaker is going to probably allow the Phyrexians to reach these different planes, and they're going to be fighting all over the multiverse. And so a returning character here, one of my personal favorites in the past, Heliod the Radiant Dawn, 2 white for a 4/4. It says when it enters the battlefield, return target enchantment that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. So of course, all the gods from Theros were enchantment creatures, so this is interesting because we're bringing something back that isn't a god. 3 in a Phyrexian blue to transform it. Activate as a sorcery. On the backside, so you can cast spells as though they had flash, and spells you cast cost 1 less for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. This could be an interesting commander. I don't think so, though, because I don't think white-blue is the exact combination you want for an Enchantress commander. I think there's a lot of more Enchantress support in a white-green, or even white itself, or even green itself. I could see this really getting played in Bant Enchantress strategies or things like that, or any white-blue decks that care about your opponents drawing cards or doing other things. This is an odd card for me because I feel like it has decent stuff there, but at the same time, I don't really see the use case yet, and that happens. I mean, there's definitely times where we read cards for the first time and you don't see it until you use it in a game. But I think Heliod in the right decks is going to do really well. You think about it, Heliod on the backside with a windfall makes all your cards cost what? 20, 21 less because of the amount of cards your opponents have drawn. I don't know if that makes a difference at all, but it could. I mean, this could be used in Jeskai decks to help do different things. I'm not 100% sure, and that's what intrigues me about this card. Where is it going to find its home in the landscape of decks that are out there? A card that really surprised me because here we have probably my favorite vampire of all time mixed with one of the most iconic angels of all time in Drana and Linvala. Drana, one of my favorite vampires of all time from Zendikar, and just always had really fun cards. Linvala, of course, most well known for all of the cards that she's had. Where we have a 1 white vampire angel 3/4 flying vigilance. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control cannot be activated at all, and then it has all activated abilities of all creatures your opponents control. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate those abilities. This seems kind of interesting. I think black-white's a great color for both angels and vampires. I don't know how much we can pay off mixing vampires and angels, whether this just becomes your vampire commander, or this just becomes your angel commander, or if this card just slots into any other vampire or angel deck that exists. I think this card's interesting. I don't see as much of an upside for it as a commander as I do for some other creatures we're going to talk about, but I think it's definitely interesting. I think it gets played in probably any angel deck in these two colors because this is just a very good card. It's costed well, has flying and vigilance. It's going to be a great attacker. It's going to be a great blocker. So I think it fits there. I think shutting off all your opponent's activated abilities is more important than you think it is. The only problem with that, of course, is that got to be careful because activated abilities can be done at instant speed. And if you go to throw this on the stack and someone wants to use that ability, they're just going to use it before it hits the battlefield, or they're going to try to play around this as much as possible. So Drawn and Involved looks interesting. I love this mashups, this idea of mashups they're doing in this set, kind of copying the Pokemon idea of mashups that they tried a year or so ago, and they did a bunch of. We're mixing two characters, not necessarily from the same plane, but pairing together and kind of getting a little bit of both. So the first ability is kind of I'd say the Linvala side of it, and the second ability is kind of the Drana side of it. I think it's kind of interesting, and it makes me really happy to see these together. Next up, we have one of, I think, just the most lulziest, the best one, Yargo and Multani, 3 black, green, for an 18/6 Frog Spirit Elemental. And I love that there's no abilities, just like any good Yargo card. It just says, I've heard much about you from my daughter, Multani rumbled. There was a time when I'd balk at your aid, Phantom, but she has shown me merit in Urborg's strange rays, and Yargle just responds with the normal bill babble that Yargle normally spits. I think this card is very interesting. I don't know if this ever sees play in Commander. I'm sure some green-black deck will find a way to slam this thing and make it good. But on flavor alone, it's fantastic. Yargle's great. Multani's great. So I think this card's really interesting, although I don't think it sees any... I don't even know if this is a viable commander for some people. Somebody's going to do it, and I love the people that are going to do this. Next up, we have one of my favorite mashups that we got to see, probably tied for my favorite mashup that we saw in this video, and that's Thalia and the Gitrog monster. You have two of these iconic, well-known creatures for different strategies. One, white, black, green for a 4/4 first strike and death touch. Sorry, legendary creature, human frog horror. So you're not going to see that type line ever. First strike, death touch. You may play an additional land in each of your turns, so we're kind of playing with the Gitrog abilities now. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter battlefield tap. So here's the Thalia ability coming in. And then here we're pairing them together. Whenever Thalia and the Gitrog monster attacks, sacrifice a creature or land and then draw a card. So this is interesting because this ability plays into the Gitrog's land strategies that we see in a lot of the Gitrog-based either Golgari land decks or a lot of the Windgrace decks that are based around Gitrog. And we kind of see this aristocrats feel, right, with the sacrificing a creature that could become really good, that decks like Korvold have run off with and things like that. I really like this mashup. This is one I'm very interested to see if I can build around. I'm very interested probably to see how this really just turns out. If this just becomes a iconic... if this becomes an iconic aristocrats commander to kind of pair these colors together, but give you that extra land on each of your turns, which I think just becomes really important for a color combination like this, or if it gets relegated to just people having fun. I don't know, but I'm excited to brew it, and it will be coming to the channel. Next up, we have the gain land cycle. So these are lands that we've seen everywhere. We've seen these lands a ton of times. These are bargain bin commons. If you want it, you'll get these in every single precon that you buy. But what I think is really cool about this set of lands is that each of them have to deal with a plane. So we have Bloodfell Caves on New Capenna, Blossoming Sands on Amonkhet, Dismal Backwater on Kamigawa. We have Jungle Hollow on Ixalan, hurting my heart a little bit. Rugged Highlands on Zendikar, hurting my heart a whole lot more. Scarred Barrens on Ikoria, Swiftwater Cliffs on Kaladesh, that pretty spire there. Thornwood Falls on Eldraine, getting to see some of the landscape of Eldraine there. Tranquil Cove on Theros, which took me a little bit to catch where this was, but it's kind of a cool landscape. And then Widscard Crag being on Dominaria. So I love that these are lands we've seen plenty of times. These get reprinted all the time, but I love that we get plane specific art for them, just like the recent Secret Lair where they reprinted all the shock lands in different landscapes. I think this is really cool, and in a set like this, it makes a ton of sense. Next up, we see Chandra Hope's Beacon for a red for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. This triggers only once per turn. I kind of like this. This is kind of like the most recent Jin Cataxius that we saw out of Kamigawa, where you get to copy the first thing that you cast that turn or when this comes down. This is really beneficial because you get to choose when this goes off. You can play Chandra and then play that spell this turn, or the next turn, you know that the first thing you cast is going to get copied. Now in the abilities, +2 to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, this is great for the turns after you lay Chandra down, because now you're adding mana every turn. +1, exile the top 5 until the end of the next turn. You can cast an instant sorcery from among those exiled cards. This is a little dangerous. I think in most spell swing decks, you don't want to get rid of that many cards because it's going to be very hard to get them back. But I think in a more mono-red deck, you don't mind giving up those extra cards for that privilege. And then -X deals X damage each for up to 2 targets. So I think a lot of Chandra's playability is going to come down to how often we can abuse that static ability. If we can use this to our advantage more often than we expect, I think Chandra's Hope Beacon becomes one of the better spell-slinging planeswalkers that we have access to in Commander. Because again, if we can keep it alive, I think in an extra turns spell-slinging deck or in a big mana spell-slinging deck, you're going to be able to protect Chandra and you're going to be able to use her to the best of her abilities. I also feel like in a Torbrand deck or a Soulfim that we just saw out of Phyrexia LV1, these red decks that care so much about output of damage, Chandra could be interesting for that, doubling up your big mana red spells or doubling up other things. So I think Chandra has hope here. I don't think it's the best Chandra that we've ever seen, but I think it definitely ranks up there for me. The question just becomes, can it play in these spell-slinging decks better than a Rawl or a Giant, some of those damage-based strategies, or as you get into multicolor, Professor Onyx, or some of these other planeswalkers that just deal a lot better with the spells. Can Chandra get up there? I don't know. I think it can, though, and I think it will see the play for it. Next up, we saw a couple of these mashups that are only going to be available for Commander. They're not going to be standard legal, but we will have the option of getting some of them as promos for our pre-releases, if I recall correctly. The first is Gorogoro and Satoru Omizawa from Kamigawa. You see them here on the left in their standard version. And then as we go on, we're going to see that every mashup is going to get a showcase frame, which is on the right, that is representative of the showcase frame that was their original sets. Of course, Gorogoro and Satoru both got cards in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, but here we see them on their new card in the frame that we got from one of the frames we got from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So blue, black, red for a 3/4 legendary creature, Goblin Human. Great power toughness, great stat line for it. Whenever one of our creatures you control that enter the battlefield this turn deal combat damage to a player, create a 5/5 red dragon spirit creature token with flying. This is great because we're paying off what its second ability wants to do, which is creatures you control get haste until end of turn. I think this is kind of an interesting card. I don't know exactly how I feel about it as a commander, although I think there's plenty of opportunities in these three colors to pay small creatures, to play unblockable creatures. I think there's plenty of ways you can go with this deck. I don't know that this becomes the best go-to for those ninja style strategies by any means, but I think we can play around with the goblins. We can play around with different things that come in for cheap mana, and we can use them effectively, and making those tokens is just going to definitely push our strategy forward. Love the art here. I think this is another example of those just great matchups that look really good together, and I could see some people who don't normally like playing Grixis coming into the combination for this and playing some of these more low-to-the-ground creature-styled Grixis strategies, as opposed to a lot of the spell slinging that tends to come from Grixis. Next up in our set of mashups, we have one that I think I really enjoy, Tilda and Lear. Love the art on the left, love the showcase on the right, bringing back that Midnight Hunt frame that I really love. Green, white, blue for a 3/3. Whenever you cast a human spell, target instant or sorcery in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. Just a legendary creature human, because of course Lear and Tilda were both humans. And this is kind of interesting. Bant humans is never something I'd honestly considered, so that could be interesting as far as doing a travel deck. I think this card represents both Lear and Tilda well. Tilda, of course, really caring about those humans. Lear caring about getting those things out of your graveyard. Of course, this doesn't just have to be a tribal commander. This could fit its way into a lot of things. I don't know how many Bant spell slinging decks are out there or anything like that. I just see this being a lot better at letting you flash back those key spells, whether it be ramp, whether it be your overrun effects, which I think are so prevalent in green for ending the game. This card's kind of interesting. I also could see this being a card that would go great in, Joda the Unifier we just got in Dominaria United. Of course, a lot of people have been playing it as Super Friends or Human Tribal. There's a lot of different ways to take that Joda. This could be a killer card in that deck for just allowing you to replay some of your tutors or replaying some of your different cards from your graveyard, your ramp, and that kind of thing. So I really like this card, as well as I really love them bringing back the Midnight Hunt frame. I absolutely really, really like it. And then our last of the three from this little subsection we saw was Slimefoot and Squeak. This was the card that my friend sent me and kind of tipped me off to the team ups, but I'm okay with that because I think this card is so cool. Slimefoot and Squeak, of course, both from Dominaria. So we have the Dominaria United showcase frame. off to the right, but with black, red, green, so Jund, 3/3. Whenever Slimefoot and Squee enters the battlefield or attacks, create a 1/1 sapling. So we're kind of blending Squee and Slimefoot together. Slimefoot, of course, loving those saplings. Squee and his goblins loving attacking. 1 black, red, green. Sacrifice a sapling, return it up to 1 target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. This is interesting. Because it kind of allows you to bring Slimefoot and Squee back without it going into the command zone, which is kind of interesting. It also allows this to go into any of the other of these Jund sacrificey decks, because you can get it back sometimes without paying a cost to food chain or things like that. I think this card's kind of interesting. I wonder how well this does as a commander, because you only really get it on ETB and attacking, and there's a lot of other ways to make the saplings cheaper, but I think that this is going to win all of the flavor that we want in this color combination. Saplings and goblins together. I think this is going to be kind of an interesting commander, and I can't wait to see what my friend who sent it to me, what he does with the deck, but also what other people can do with Slimefoot and Squee, because I can only imagine what fun and jank people are going to come up with this. I think it's pretty great. Next up, we have my favorite mashup. It's very hard because I love Gitrog and I love Thalia for a lot of ways, but this one to me is absolutely primo. If you've been paying attention to the decks I've been making from over the last couple weeks, you saw that I really wanted to take that green-white tokens deck that we got out of the starter decks and make it my own. I have Jetmir, and I absolutely love Jetmir, but Jetmir has a specific way that it plays. It has a specific play line that it wants to go for. It's fast and loose with the tokens. It's not slow and methodical, and I've been wanting to make a green-white tokens deck that does that more traditional Selesnya token route. Go wide, build it up, ram your opponents over. And I think this Galton Mavrin does exactly what I want this commander to do. It pairs one of my favorite dinosaurs of all time and one of my favorite green cards to be released in the last few years because of just how cheap Galt is to cast. With Mavrin, a character from another vampire who created tokens as well, and we get a 12/12 for 7. It is a legendary dinosaur vampire. Trample. Whenever you attack, you choose one. Note, on my first read of this, I thought Galt and Mavrin had to attack, but they don't have to. It just says whenever you attack, create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur creature token with Trample, where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures, or create X 1/1 X X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. Now remember, these green-white token strategies are going to be doubling, quadrupling, times 8ing the amount of tokens you're making with this ability. So I can see that top ability probably potentially ending some games, depending on what you have out, what you have active on the battlefield. This plus a Beastmaster Ascension, this plus many other things could end a game. Now the really cool part of this one is, on the other ones, I was trying to show the alternate arts if I could without digging too deep, because again, I didn't want to see too many things. What's really cool about this one is the one on the right here is the standard one that's coming in the set. The one on the left is our bundle promo. So if you buy a bundle of March Against the Machines, you will get Galton Mavrin. But the cool part is the middle one here is the showcase frame for this. And this is actually one of the showcase frames we're going to see in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, which is coming out later this year and early next year in the winter. And this is what they call their treasure frame. And I love it. I think it looks so cool. I love the art on the framing. I love the gold coin in the center. That'll be the version of this that I'll be targeting because I think I'm going to take that Queen All-in-All deck that we saw me make the video for. I kept that list. I kind of Millzy-fied it, put some extra cards in it. But I think I will be taking that deck, transferring over into Galton Mavrin, and just having some fun with one of my favorite dinosaurs of all time and making it into a deck that I think I can really enjoy. And the last of the cards that was shown, I think it was inevitable. I think a 5-color Amnav was absolutely inevitable, and we got to see Amnav Locus finally coming into 5 colors. Cool part is, well, not cool, but kind of expected, was that he got completed, and that black mana is now a Phyrexian black as opposed to just a black. For a 4/4 that says if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead. Kind of interesting. We're kind of copying that original Amnath's ability, but black instead of green. So makes sense, right? Beginning your pre-combat main phase, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card if it has 3 or more colored mana symbols and its mana cost. So not 3 or more different mana symbols in its mana cost, like I originally read it to be. 3 or more colored mana symbols in its mana cost. So this could be a straight 5-color commander if you want it to be, where you're playing all Wooburg cards. This could be a commander where you pair lots of 3, 4, and 5 color cards together. But I think there's a lot of options for this. If you do add 3 mana in any combination of the colors that are on that card and put it into your hand, if you don't reveal it, put it into your hand. Very interesting once per main phase, which is kind of interesting. I don't think that this card eclipses Amnav Locus of Creation. Obviously, that card is a menace, and it does a lot of really great things for landfall strategies. I do think this card will get played, though. I think it has lots of room to be built on its own. It has lots of room to go in those Joe to the Unifier or those Legendary Matters decks like we saw and Dominaria United, whether it's a precon or this could be an interesting card to make the commander of that precon instead. I think this card has a lot of upside. I'm just intrigued to see where it actually lands. The cool part, of course, as well, the middle one, we get to see that Zendikar Rising showcase frame, one of my favorite showcase frames that they did. We get to see that in the middle with the pretty new art with all of those colors active. But that seems pretty cool. And I'm of course still going to brew around it. Why not, right? It's just so much fun. Look at him. But definitely not my favorite Amnath of all time, but I think it still looks pretty cool. So we're going to come back to the article. We're just going to roam down here. There's a couple things in the article that I couldn't find good pictures for on the internet, and I didn't want to spoil too much. So we get to see some of the dates here. Look at the packaging. We got our draft boosters. We got our set boosters. We got our collector boosters with Elspeth there looking pretty cool. Our bundle. Our Jumpstart boosters as normal, of course, and our pre-release pack. Now, March of the Machine is going to be our main commander deck release of the year, which means we're getting 5 decks. Now, in the live stream, they mentioned what all these decks were, and I completely forgot. I think I still remember some of them, but I apologize. I don't remember all of them. I believe they said this black-white deck was a Phyrexian deck. I believe they said this was an Esper Knights deck, which is kind of interesting. That could be a cool color combination for Knights. This Jeskai deck, I believe they said was Convoke. I could be wrong on that, but that could be interesting. I believe they said this Naya deck was +1/+1 counters, which is not a bad idea for that strategy. And then this Teamer deck says it's going to be artifact tokens. I think that's pretty interesting as well. So 5 commander decks. And, well, the big thing for these commander decks is Plane Chase is coming back. Plane Chase, if you don't know, is a format add-on for Commander and other game formats where you can add a central... Think about it kind of like a world enchantment that affects all players. Each one of these decks is coming with 5 new Plane Chases and 4 reprints, including these phenomenon cards, which are kind of like when you flip up a new plane, they could make something weird happen. So I kind of like this idea. Plane Chase is something that the community has liked, but the problem is it was released so long ago that probably most people have never had a chance to actually play with Plane Chase. And my hope here is that these new Plane Chase cards will get people back interested in Plane Chase. I've played Plane Chase a couple times, and it's a ton of fun. It adds so much of a swing to games sometimes, and can be really cool in the process. So I might honestly try to invest in all 5 decks just for the Plane Chase cards, because I think they're pretty cool. And the earlier you if that's your interest, if you want to get all of the Plane Chase reprints by getting all of the decks, the earlier you pre-release the earlier you pre-order them, the better. You'll get the lowest cost possible. And like I said, if you pre-order all 5, you will get all of the new Plane Chase cards. I think they're pretty cool, and I happily welcome 50 Plane Chase cards coming, 10 in each deck for us. All right, now we're getting into the booster fun, and I think the 2 cards on your screen are going to confuse some people, because neither of these cards are cards from Mother of the Machine, or Mother of the Machines, Mommy, no, March of the Machines, and that's because March of the Machines has another insert set, just like Brother Wars Retro Artifacts, just like and then just like some other like Strixhaven's Mystical Archive before it, we're going to have a chance to get cards from what they're calling this multiverse Legends set. This is going to include a bunch of legends printed in the showcase frames from the sets that they came from. So we see Atraxa here in a Capenna frame, which is kind of interesting because I don't think anyone would think of Atraxa coming from Capenna, but I think it's really gorgeous. And then, of course, we see Ragavan in the Kaladesh frame. For anyone who plays any attention to formats outside of Commander, you're going to know that Ragavan is a very expensive card. So I'm very intrigued to see it come back. They said they're going to have 4 printings, a standard print, foil etched, which I absolutely love foil etched cards. I think they're beautiful. A new Halo foil. We're going to see that later once we see more from the set. And then I believe they said there's a fourth one, and I can't remember the fourth one off the top of my head. But that's a lot of cool treatments. I am all for these bonus sheets things. I loved the Mystical Archive. It brought great reprints of great spells. I loved the Retro Artifacts in the Brothers War. Oh, sorry, the fourth was serialized cards like we did for the Retro Artifacts. I almost forgot on that one. So I love it. I think they're really cool, and I hope they pick the right things. I think Ragavan's a good pick. Atrax is a great pick. It's gotten a lot of printings already, but of course a lot of people love Atrax, and Atrax has got so much support in Phyrexia, All We Want, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of support in this set as well. But I'm very intrigued to see what they pick here. My hope is that we start seeing reprints of really iconic commanders from different planes in this updated frames. I hope to see a lot of just classic commanders, whether it be things like Tadiova or Omnath out of Zendikar, Tadiova off of Dominaria, or Omnath from Zendikar. I mean, you pick a plane, and I'm sure there's iconic commander that you'd want to see reprinted in one of these frames. So I'm intrigued to see what's going to come out of this. We're seeing two mythics here, probably what could end up being two of the most expensive cards in this subset. Of course, Ragavan is a $70 to $80 card in its own right, only being printed once so far. Atraxa, as prices come down, it's been printed a couple times now, so I'm sure that Atraxa will just allow it to be used by more people. But I love this. This is something that I think I love the most. I love these showcase frames and the way they make planes feel like their own individual thing, and I love seeing that in this. Of course, these were some of the alternate versions for the cards we looked at. Love the Thalia and Gitrog in that Midnight Hunt frame. Heliod, of course, getting that Constellation frame from Theros. Jin Cataxius is getting this Ichor treatment that we just saw in Phyrexia. We see Yargo and Motanda get that beautiful stained glass frame from Dominaria. And of course, we're just showing off our borderless and extended art treatments, just like every other card in the set that doesn't have a fancy treatment will always get an extended art for the rest of the rares. But of course, some of our planeswalkers get borderless frames. Our promos, the buy a boxes, Amnav Locus Evolve. So if you buy a box through your local game store, you have a chance to get the buy a box promo. And then if you buy a bundle, you will always get Galta. If you go to pre-release, you have a chance to get one of these as your pre-release promo, and I think all three of these are pretty solid. Eternal Witness, of course, an absolute classic in Commander, especially in graveyard-based decks or like Muldrotha or Blink decks and getting things back from the graveyard. Quarter Calling, a classic search spell in the deck, and then Niv Mizzet, one of the most well-known dragons of all time. We talked about these couple that are coming in the pre-release for there. I think they'll just come inside the pre-release packs. I'm not sure, but I'll be definitely opening up a pre-release pack on the channel so we can look at that. All right, time for another Secret Lair, and it says even Secret Lair has been spared from the Phyrexian invasion is getting in the action. There will be 3 drops tied to March of the Machine, but we're going to show you one today, and each of these drops has cards printed from their original showcase frames, and immediately my eyes went to Questing Beast. If you don't know me, Questing Beast is one of my favorite cards released in the last 2 years. I try to play it in every green deck I can. I love Questing Beast, and I absolutely love this frame. It's in that beautiful storybook frame from Eldraine, and it makes me so happy. You see Olivia Valderin in that blood frame from Crimson Vow, looks great. Wheel and Deal in that Capenna style gilded foil frame. Walking Ballista in the Kaladesh frame. This is a great card. A lot of people really like Walking Ballista. Of course, a commander combo piece in its own right. I'm honestly might just buy the Secret Lair just for these two, and then the World Tree and that beautiful Kaldheim art. We're getting 2 more that we haven't seen yet. My hope is it's just like this. I want 2 more just like this. Give me iconic commander cards or great cards in their original frame they came in, and it'll make me very happy. This one is already worth it for me between Walking Ballista, the World Tree, and Questing Beast. I use these 3 cards in different decks, or I would use them in multiple decks. So I think this would be well worth it for me. Of course, World Tree is a great way in 5-color decks to get all your lands to tap for any color. The only threshold you need is just 6 or more lands. So love this. I absolutely love this, and I hope that our other 2 Secret Lair drops are going to be very much the same. And then we just talked a teeny bit about March of the Machine, the Aftermath. This is a very small set that's going to come out after March of the Machine, just showing about what happens afterwards. And we see one card from it, the Kenrith's Royal Funeral, showing off a tomb here with 2 of the Kenriths. It's going to be very hard for us to assume. I mean, I'm assuming it's not Rowan and Will. I'm assuming it's their parents. They're dying here. My guess is because we see the crown on the male here, and then we see Linvala's headdress thing that she's wearing on her card in here. So I'm going to guess it's their parents, and we see them on their tomb here, and we see a card. Very interesting card. I'm not quite sure on it yet, and I'd like to see what we see more of March of the Machine before I figure out here. But it says when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target legendary creature cards from your graveyard. You draw X cards and you live X life, where X is the greatest mana value among them. And it says legendary spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card exiled with it. I think this could be really interesting for Legendary Matters decks. Joda, Kethis, of course, plays a lot of these Legendary Matter cards and things like that. I think the card's interesting. It's going to come down to whether you can pay off that amount of Legendaries in your deck. But we are all very intrigued to see what the Aftermath's going to be. We've seen Amazon leaks with different packs and how many cards in them. We don't know a ton about Aftermath, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't know anything. And I don't want to oversell or undersell what it could be, and then they give us a lot of information about when we can expect the story. But guys, that is our first look at March of the Machine. Seeing Plane Chase come back just makes me really want to pre-order all the decks. It's not the most cheap thing to do, but I just think that Plane Chase is such a cool thing. I'm sure I could find the cards later, but with this being the main Commander set release of the year. Of course, last year's was Capenna. That generally means we get more new cards in these decks. So these decks probably should all have 15 or 20 new cards instead of the 6 or 8 that we get in more of the regular decks. So my hope is we see some really cool things in these decks. We see a pretty cool Johnny there. Love the idea of Esper Knights. I just think some of these are kind of interesting, including this team or artifacts thing. So I'm intrigued to see what the decks become. We'll talk way more about the decks when we get closer. We'll be doing brews for all of them. Believe me, all of this March of the Machines content will be coming on the channel. I plan to outbrew your favorite Magic channel, and I'm excited to do it. I'm very happy to see this all come, but between the set's release and now, I have a baby on the way. My wife and I are very excited, and I can't wait to be a dad, but mostly I can't wait to make content for you guys and start this and just continue this YouTube run with you. Let me know what you think of March of the Machines down in the comments. Drop me a like if you like this longer form video where I talk through my thoughts of things. Drop me a subscribe if you want to see more content. Again, my goal is to outbrew your favorite Magic channel, and I hope that you'll join me along in the process. If you've watched this far, just leave me a comment on what you think of March of the Machine. I don't need anything special. I'm not going to ask for anything special, but I'd love to know your opinion, to talk with you down in the comments, and to have a good time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.